And welcome back. We're turning now to one of the most closely watched races this primary cycle, and the next big test for the Democratic establishment. It's the battle between Congresswoman Haley Stevens and former Wayne County Health Director Dr. Abdul El-Sayed to replace Michigan Senator Gary Peters, who has announced he's not seeking re-election. So the winner of the primary in just 2 weeks will face former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers. This weekend, El-Sayed held a series of rallies with Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, two of the most progressive members of Congress who have thrown their support behind his campaign. And joining me now is Abdul El-Sayed, and we welcome you here. Thank you so much for making time. And so I really want to get at a bit of what motivates you and how it plays into the realities in Michigan. So Michigan is a state that President Trump won twice. And what makes you think that someone who is leaning progressive, as you are, can win in November when it has been so much of a state that has relied on independent voters and soft Republicans and moderate Democrats? How can you win there?
I'll tell you this, I've been up and down my state, 110 different cities, 475 public events. No matter where I go, I don't hear people asking, where do I sit on a left-right spectrum? Instead, they're saying, why do I feel so locked out of my politics? How am I going to afford my groceries? What's going to happen next month when my rent or my mortgage is due? What happens if I get sick? Am I locked out of the healthcare system because I can't afford my deductible? These are the questions animating most folks. The divide in our politics is not left or right. The divide in our politics is people who are locked out and people doing the locking out. I'm not somebody who's ever taken a dime of corporate money. I'm running against a Democrat who is got a $50 million crutch paid for by AIPAC, by Big Pharma, by Big Tech, by our local utilities, by our big health insurance corporations. All of that tells you who she's going to fight for. And that's not you. That's not making your bills more affordable. That's not making sure you can see a doctor. In fact, it's helping to rig a system to make those things less attainable for you. So how do you win? You win by speaking to the challenges that people are facing in their everyday lives, rather than playing this political game of asking where you fit on a left-right spectrum.
So you're hearing from voters, you're getting that feedback, but there is sort of the mechanics of how these races work. And you lost the Democratic primary for governor in 2018 to Gretchen Whitmer. Your opponent has won 4 terms in Congress and is endorsed by both Senator Gary Peters and former Senator Debbie Stabenow. They both know how to win statewide. They are choosing your primary opponent. So what is your strategy to appeal to those voters who are more centrist, who are more likely to even give a listen to Republicans in the fall election?
Voters want change, and I think nothing says change like having the last 2 senators pick the next one. I just think people are sick and tired of a politics that has locked them out for a very long time. And I think the way you appeal to them is to talk about the challenges that they all face. Right now, gas is what, $4, is down from $5, and it's probably going to go up again because this war doesn't end. The Republican who told you that he was never going to fight another forever war just got us into what feels like a forever war. We're in a situation right now where the guy I'm going to be running against, he has never met a pharma lobbyist he didn't like, voted countless times to raise prescription drug prices, helped to architect the opioid epidemic, and then left our great state to go move to Florida where he made $14 million he really can't explain. So I think the way that we win is by having an honest conversation about what it looks like to take on the system of politics that has rigged our system for too long. Say what you will about my positions on things like guaranteeing you health care or standing up to corporations or for unions. I think you probably don't want a politician who's taking money from the utility that raised your rates faster than in 46 states over the last 20 years. I think you probably don't want a guy who architected the opioid epidemic and has said nothing about all of the damage he's caused. So I think we win by actually taking the fight to Republicans.
Let's talk about some of the platform ideas that you are running on. And I want to tap into something you said at a rally this weekend. Let's play that clip.
So it is time for us in this country to stand up and decide that we are no longer going to send unconditional foreign military aid to foreign governments. Not Israel, not Egypt, not Jordan, not Saudi Arabia. I want my tax dollars in Michigan.
I imagine that voters that were there liked hearing about tax dollars staying in Michigan, but let's drill down into this a little bit. Are you saying that you would not support foreign aid broadly, or is it just in specific cases? For example, would you rule out foreign aid that goes to other nations, not those ones you specifically mentioned?
I said unconditional foreign military aid is what I would rule out, right?
And
When
what
it's
do you
got
mean by
conditions
that?
like when we invest in supporting Ukraine against the effort of a would-be dictator trying to violate their territorial sovereignty, that is conditional military aid, conditional on the circumstance in which they are fighting back and protecting and upholding international law. So to me, that's
yes,
where it really goes
for
back
aid
to
to
international
Ukraine,
law.
for Ukraine.
So
So
let
yes
me just
on
offer a
Ukraine.
framework instead of yes and no per country. The framework is I believe in international law, and I believe that when it comes to upholding international law, we have an opportunity to support via foreign military aid. But when it comes to opposing military law, like or international law, like backstopping an apartheid or a genocide, or supporting a anti-democratic government in Egypt, I think we should not do it. So my point is this shouldn't just be unconditional to certain allies. It should be based on certain conditions according to international law.
If we look at foreign aid in another way, things like USAID, where President Trump stopped that organization that provided U.S. support around the world, largely for humanitarian, medical, other kinds of things like fortifying elections elsewhere. Do you support that?
Well, look, I'd be the first ever public health official elected to the U.S. Senate. And I know something about epidemics, which is if you stop them where they are, you can prevent them coming to you. And I think it's a smart use of our tax dollars to fight epidemics elsewhere so they don't become epidemics in New York City or Detroit or Grand Rapids or Lansing. And so I think we have an opportunity to be taking on big challenges that are going to end up at our doorstep if we don't, rather than creating big challenges like wars that end up in our doorstep, like the war in Iran.
Several physicians have been elected to the Senate, but you're saying public health official because that's a job you held in
There hasn't been a
Michigan.
Democratic doctor elected to the U.S. Senate since 1969, and I'd be the first ever former public health official elected to the U.S. Senate.
Let's talk about some other issues in your primary. So if you were to win, and then there are those Democrats who have supported Haley Stevens, who do believe in supporting Israel and sending money there, and there's polling that backs that up. How would you reach out to those voters who might choose her in the primary? But if you're victorious, how would you appeal to them for November?
Well, look, I have my principles, and I hope that they'd support the idea that, we have a responsibility, I think, to uphold international law. And insofar as the Israeli government is violating international law, I don't think they have a right to our tax dollars. I think we should be keeping our tax dollars here to invest in children and schools and opportunity here. Now, a lot of folks conflate this with standing up against anti-Semitism. I'll be clear, I grew up in a community where I was blessed to have about 40% of our community from the Jewish community. And I learned a lot about Judaism and Jewish history and Jewish culture. You will find me to be the chief opponent of anti-Semitism, especially since I know what it's like to be discriminated against for how I pray as a devout Muslim. And so I think we can differentiate between Judaism and the Jewish people here and Israel and AIPAC there. And I hope that folks who recognize that we have a responsibility to take care of our problems here at home would recognize that for me, it's about principle. My family comes from Egypt. I don't want to send my foreign my money there either to backstop a military dictatorship there either. So ultimately, I hope that folks will support us on principle and recognize there's a lot of work we could do to take on the challenges we face here at home.
There's been a lot of discussion of Israel as an issue that is broadly being discussed in the Democratic Party and certainly in Michigan, where there's a large Middle Eastern population. You're a part of that community. Your opponent says you do not support a two-state solution in the Middle East, where Israel is a sovereign nation and then Palestine, Gaza has its own sovereignty. Is that correct?
She doesn't either, first of all. If you're sending $3.3 billion to a foreign government that wants to foreclose on the possibility of Palestine, you clearly don't support a two-state solution either. But what I support is equal rights to peace, dignity, and self-determination for Palestinians and Jewish Israelis alike. I believe that they ought to be the ultimate arbiters of what the ultimate peace should look like. If that is a two-state solution and is chosen by the free Palestinian people and free Jewish Israeli people, then great. And if that's a single-state solution or a 23-state solution or a land-for-all solution, that is their choice to make. The problem, though, is that as American policymakers, we've often had the hubris of thinking that we get to dictate what the ultimate solution for other people should look like. And I don't think the ultimate peace is going to be decided from the United States of America. I think the ultimate peace is going to be decided by equal stakes from Jewish Israelis and Palestinians alike. And I want our tax dollars not to be spent foreclosing on that possibility for other people. I want them to be spent here, providing schools and healthcare here.
Let's talk about another policy position. And you have called for abolishing ICE. And while you are also advocating for a secure southern border. So how would you address illegal entry into the United States? And do you believe that is an offense that would be subject to deportation? And how would you do that if ICE is no longer functioning as we know it?
Well, as you well know, that is not enforced by ICE. That's enforced by Customs and Border Protection. I'm not calling for the abolition of Customs and Border Protection. I actually think that they need to operate according to the law, but I think we need to be invested in making sure that we secure our southern border rather than this farce of making a show out of detentions with the idea that somehow this is about immigration enforcement. This is not about immigration enforcement. This is about criminalizing immigration on its own terms and making a show of immigration enforcement. I'll be clear. I went to Minneapolis at the height of Project Metro Surge. I saw for myself what that looked like. But Minneapolis is not the southern border. So if we think that ICE has anything to do with the southern border, let's just be clear that the principal actions that they've taken have been in Chicago and Minneapolis, which are nowhere near the southern border. So we can have a safe, secure southern border, and we don't need ICE to do it.
Let me turn to another part of what life would be like if you are able to win this primary and to win in November. You said that you would not be coming to D.C. to, quote, make nice. And you said, don't invite me to your cocktail parties. A lot of people here will tell you that in order to be successful once you're in Washington, you have to build relationships. You have to work with others. Do you think that going it alone and trying to not be a part of D.C. would make you effective?
Well, I'm not going to be going it alone. There's plenty of folks in D.C. with whom I'm really looking forward to work. And look, I'll build great cordial relationships with everybody. But my goal is not to sit with corporate lobbyists every day to be told what it is that they want done. My goal is to serve Michiganders. And I intend to keep my family in Michigan because I want to serve Michiganders. It's more important to me to listen to Michiganders and what they want rather than to go and have cocktail parties with corporate lobbyists who fund the whole thing and then pretend that somehow we're doing the people's work when, in fact, we are taking money from the same corporations to pass policy that makes life harder for people in places like where I come from in Michigan. So ultimately, look, I'm looking forward to having great relationships, but that doesn't mean that I'm coming to party with you. That means that I'm coming to work on behalf of my state, and let's get the work done.
We so appreciate your time. Thank you. We know this is a heated point in the race, and there's a lot of demands on your time, and we appreciate you sharing your views with us today. We have also reached out to Haley Stevens' campaign. She has an open invitation to join us here on this show, and we know that we'll be watching the Michigan race closely.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.